You did the hard thing. You saved $10,000. Maybe it took you a year. Maybe it took you 3. But you got there and you felt incredible for about a week. Then a weird thing happened. You looked at the $10,000. You looked at where you want to be. $100,000, financial freedom, whatever your version of making it is. And the gap felt enormous. Like standing at the base of a mountain you can't see the top of. You know you're supposed to keep going. But nobody has actually told you what the path looks like from here. The internet is full of how to save your first $1,000 content and what to do when you have $1 million content, and almost nothing in between. That middle stretch, from $10,000 to $100,000, is the most important phase of wealth building, and it's the least talked about phase. Here's why that matters. The $10,000 to $100,000 phase is where most people either break through to real wealth or stall out permanently, not because they lost motivation, but because they don't understand that the rules of the game change during this phase, and if you keep playing by the same rules that got you to $10,000, you'll plateau. The path from $10,000 to $100,000 requires a fundamentally different approach. And once you see what that approach is, the whole journey clicks into place in a way that makes it feel almost inevitable. My name is Max, and I want to help you learn how to make your money work more for you in your life. This channel is about building real understanding, not just what to do, but why it works and how to think about it. If you're in the $10,000 to $100,000 phase right now, subscribe, because this is exactly the kind of content that makes the middle stretch feel less just like a slog and more like a strategy. So here's what most people believe when they hit $10,000. They think the path to $100,000 is just more of the same. Save harder, cut more expenses, grind longer. They think it's a straight line, just 10 times the effort that got them to $10,000. And that belief is why so many people burn out around $25,000 or $30,000 and start drifting backward, because if the path to $100,000 were really just do what you did 10 more times, it would be soul crushing, and eventually your soul would crush. The truth is, the path from $10,000 to $100,000 isn't one phase. It's 3 phases. Each phase has different rules, different priorities, and a different relationship between your effort and your results. And understanding which phase you're in changes everything about what you should focus on. Let me explain this with an analogy that makes the whole thing tangible. Think of building wealth like building a bonfire. From $0 to $10,000, you are gathering kindling, twigs, newspaper, small dry sticks. Everything was fragile. One gust of wind, one emergency, one bad month could scatter everything you'd built. The work was tedious, the fire was tiny, but you kept at it, and eventually you had a small flame. That's your $10,000. Now you're entering phase 2. And in phase 2, the task changes completely. You're not gathering kindling anymore. You're adding logs. Bigger fuel, sturdier material. The fire is established enough that it won't go out from a light breeze, but it's not self-sustaining yet. You still need to feed it, but the type of fuel matters more than the quantity. A single good log does more than a handful of twigs, and the skills you need, knowing which logs to pick, how to arrange them, when to let the fire breathe, those are different from the skills you needed as a kindling gatherer. Phase 3 starts around $60,000 to $70,000, when the fire is hot enough to start drying and igniting its own fuel. Compounding becomes meaningful. Your returns start contributing real dollars, and your job shifts from feeding the fire to protecting it, making sure nothing disrupts the engine that's now building itself. 3 phases, 3 skill sets, 1 journey. And most people try to kindling gather their way to $100,000 and wonder why they're exhausted by $30,000. But here's where it gets really interesting. Each of these phases doesn't just change your financial strategy. It changes your psychology. And understanding the psychological shift at each stage is what separates people who grind through this and people who glide through it. In phase 1, $10,000 to $30,000 you're still close enough to zero that your brain hasn't fully relaxed. Psychologists call this the proximity to threat effect. Even though you have savings, your nervous system remembers what zero felt like, and it's reluctant to let go of the hypervigilance. This is why people in this phase tend to be overly cautious. They hoard cash, They're afraid to invest. They check their balance constantly. And honestly, that's fine. That vigilance is what got you to $10,000. But it becomes a liability if you let it keep you from investing, because cash sitting in a checking account from $10,000 to $30,000 is money that's losing the compounding race. The research on this is clear. Behavioral economists have documented what they call status quo bias, or the tendency to keep doing what you've been doing, even when circumstances change. You saved your way to $10,000 by not investing, by hoarding cash, by being cautious, and your brain wants to keep doing that because it worked. But the game has changed. At $10,000, your emergency fund is funded. The next dollars need to go into investments, not savings. That shift from saving to investing is the single most important mindset change in phase one. And it's harder than it sounds, because investing feels risky in a way that saving doesn't. When you put money in a savings account, it's there tomorrow. When you put money in the market, it might be worth less tomorrow. And your brain, still operating with that proximity to threat vigilance, screams at you not to do it. What if the market crashes? What if you need that money? What if you lose everything? These are the voices of a nervous system that hasn't caught up to your new reality. You have a cushion now. You can afford calculated risk. But telling your nervous system that is like telling someone who nearly drowned that the pool is safe. The logic is right. The feeling takes time. The way through is to start small and let exposure build tolerance. Maybe your first investment is $200 a month into an index fund, while the rest stays in savings. After a few months, you watch your investment fluctuate and you don't die. Your brain registers this, and gradually you become comfortable directing more toward investments. This gradual exposure is exactly how cognitive behavioral therapy works for anxiety, and it works for investment anxiety too. In phase two, $30,000 to $60,000, something different happens. The initial excitement of building wealth has worn off. The progress feels slow because you're in what I call the awkward middle. Too far from zero to feel desperate, too far from $100,000 to feel motivated. This is where the dropout rate is highest, not because the math stops working, but because the emotional fuel runs out. The psychological concept here is hedonic adaptation, the well-documented tendency for humans to return to a baseline level of satisfaction, regardless of positive changes. The thrill of watching your balance grow wears off, just like the thrill of a new car or a new relationship. And without a replacement source of motivation, people start making exceptions. They skip a month of investing. They let lifestyle inflation creep in. They start telling themselves, I've built a cushion, I can relax a little. The antidote isn't more discipline. It's a different kind of motivation. In the awkward middle, you have to shift from milestone-based motivation, I can't wait to hit $50,000, to identity-based motivation. I'm the kind of person who invests every month regardless of how I feel. That shift from outcome to identity is what carries you through the flat part of the curve. Phase 3, $60,000 to $100,000, brings the most surprising psychological shift. This is where your portfolio starts moving in ways that feel disconnected from your effort. You contribute $1,000, but the market adds $3,000 in a good month, or subtracts $5,000 in a bad month. The volatility is real money now, not theoretical, not abstract. And your brain has to learn to sit with that. This is where emotional resilience becomes your most valuable skill, not financial literacy, not budgeting. Emotional resilience, the ability to watch $8,000 disappear in a market correction and not panic sell. The ability to see your portfolio drop from $75,000 to $67,000 and keep investing anyway. That skill, which can only be built through experience, not education, is what separates people who reach $100,000 from people who sell at $65,000 and restart the cycle from $40,000. Now let me show you the math, because this is where the three-phase model really comes alive. Let's say you're starting at $10,000 and you invest $800 a month at 8% average annual returns. Here's the timeline. Phase 1, $10,000 to $30,000. Takes about 22 months. During that stretch, you contributed $17,600, and your investments added roughly $2,400. You did most of the work. Compounding was a background player. Phase 2, $30,000 to $60,000. Takes about 27 months. You contributed another $21,600, but your investments generated around $8,400 in returns. Compounding is now pulling some real weight. It went from an extra to a supporting actor. Phase 3, $60,000 to $100,000. Takes about 28 months. Your contributions were $22,400, and your investments contributed approximately $17,600, almost 50-50. Compounding went from supporting actor to co-star, and if you keep going past $100,000, it becomes the lead. Total time from $10,000 to $100,000, about 77 months. Call it 6.5 years. Now, you might be thinking, 6.5 years? That feels like forever. But let me reframe that. You're going to be 6.5 years older regardless. The only question is whether you'll be 6.5 years older with $100,000 or without it. And here's the accelerator nobody mentions. During those 6.5 years, your income will probably increase. If you can bump your contribution from $800 to $1,000 a month by year 3, you shave about 8 months off the timeline. Bump it to $1,200 by year 5, and you're at $100,000 in under 5.5 years total. And this is the part most people miss. The journey from $10,000 to $100,000 doesn't just build a portfolio, it builds a completely new version of you. Because the person who navigated 3 psychological phases, who learned to invest instead of hoard, who survived the awkward middle without quitting, and who developed the emotional resilience to sit through market swings, that person is fundamentally different from the person who started at $10,000 wondering what comes next. You've built what I call financial composure. It's different from financial literacy. Literacy is knowing what to do. Composure is being able to do it when everything in your environment is screaming at you not to. And composure can only be forged under real conditions. Real money, real markets, real uncertainty. The $10,000 to $100,000 stretch is where that composure gets built. And it's the reason people who reach $100,000 through this journey rarely lose it. They've been tested in a way that people who inherit or stumble into money haven't been. Think about it like martial arts. You can read every book about self-defense ever written. You can study techniques, watch videos, understand the theory perfectly. But until you've actually been in a ring, until someone has thrown a punch at you, and you stayed calm enough to respond effectively, you don't have composure. You have knowledge. The $10,000 to $100,000 journey is the ring. It's where you learn that a market drop isn't a knockout, that slow progress isn't failure, and that boring consistency beats exciting speculation every single time. Those lessons can only be earned, and you're earning them right now. You're probably wondering how this translates to real life, though. So let me walk through a few scenarios. You're at $45,000 invested, and your employer offers a relocation to a new city with a $15,000 raise, but no relocation assistance. The move costs about $8,000 without your portfolio. You can't afford the upfront cost and the opportunity passes. With your investments as a backstop, even if you don't touch them, the bank approves a small personal loan because your financial picture is strong. You make the move, the raise pays back the loan in 6 months, and you're now on a higher earning trajectory that accelerates everything. A market correction hits, and the S&P drops 15% in 2 months. Your $55,000 portfolio is now $47,000. Without phase 3 composure, you panic and sell, locking into $8,000 in losses. With the emotional resilience you built during this journey, you hold. You even increased your contributions because stocks are cheaper. 6 months later, The market recovers, and you're at $62,000, now higher than before the correction. The person who panicked is still at $47,000, wondering if they should get back in. A friend approaches you about co-investing in a small commercial property. The minimum buy-in is $25,000. At $10,000, this was impossible. At $70,000, it's a real conversation. You evaluate the deal. Maybe you participate, maybe you don't. But you have the leverage to be selective rather than excluded. Your company announces a hiring freeze and your position feels shaky. At $10,000 saved, this is a low-grade emergency. At $60,000 invested, it's barely a blip on your emotional radar. You start casually exploring other options, not from desperation, but from the confidence of someone who has time and resources to be selective. And that selectivity almost always leads to better outcomes. And here's where the career shift compounds on top of everything else. By the time you're in the $60,000 to $100,000 range, your relationship with your employer has fundamentally changed. You're not just someone with savings anymore. You're someone with a growing portfolio that generates meaningful returns independent of your paycheck. And that changes the math of your career in a subtle but powerful way. You start thinking about your job as one of multiple income streams, not the only one. That reframe alone changes how you negotiate, how you tolerate nonsense, and how you evaluate opportunities. The concept of walkaway money usually gets applied at much higher numbers. But honestly, $50,000 to $70,000 invested is enough to give most people a year of runway if they needed it. And a year of runway means you never have to accept a bad offer, stay in a toxic environment, or settle for less than you're worth. That leverage, wielded consistently over 5 or 10 years, is worth far more than the portfolio itself. Now, I need to warn you about the trap that catches people in this specific stretch. The biggest danger between $10,000 and $100,000 isn't overspending, it's tinkering. People reach $30,000 or $40,000 and they start getting smart. They start day trading a little. They start chasing individual stocks because the index fund feels too boring. They start moving money between accounts, trying to optimize every fraction of a percent. And in the process, they make emotional trades, miss recovery rallies, and trigger tax events that eat into their returns. Let me put numbers on this. Studies from Dalbar show that the average equity investor earned about 5.5% annually over the past 30 years, while the S&P 500 returned about 10%. The difference, nearly half the returns gone, was almost entirely due to investor behavior. Buying high, selling low, switching strategies at the wrong time. The boring investor who automated $800 a month into an index fund and never touched it outperformed nearly everyone who tried to be clever. So, if there's one piece of tactical advice I'd give you for this stretch, it's this. Automate and ignore. Set the contribution. Pick a broad market index fund and then leave it alone, not because the market will always go up, but because your attempts to time it will, statistically, make things worse. The greatest edge you have as a small investor is patience. You don't trade it for the illusion of control. That's not sacrifice, that's strategy. The most powerful move in investing is often doing nothing at all. So here's what I want you to carry with you. The path from $10,000 to $100,000 isn't a straight line, and it isn't one phase. It's a 3-act story where the rules, the psychology, and the math change at each stage. And now that you can see the stages, you can navigate them intentionally instead of stumbling through them and wondering why things feel different at $35,000 than they did at $12,000. You're not in the easy part. I'm not going to pretend you are. The middle stretch is where the work is unglamorous, the progress feels slow, and the temptation to quit or tinker is strongest. But it's also where the deepest transformation happens. The person who walks out the other side of this journey at $100,000 isn't just wealthier. They're composed, they're strategic, they've built a relationship with their future self that most people never develop. And the beautiful thing is, the hardest part is already behind you. You built $10,000, you proved you can do this. Now you just need to evolve your approach for each phase, trust the math, and stay in the game. 6.5 years, 3 phases, one decision at a time. Your $10,000 already proved who you are. The next $90,000 just proves how far that person can go.